Greetings and happy holidays. You are listening to Horror Nerds at Church, a ridiculously queer podcast where we could take a deep dive into a horror film and talk about how it connects to queerness, religion, and theology, a horror film or a horrific television special. My name my name is Pace Warfield, and I am the set designer who thought that just throwing in things like a TV and a coffee pot would dress this set in a very sci-fi futuristic way and not be at all obvious.
And I'm Pastor Emily, and I am the protocol droid who actually speaks, not just understands, Shriwook.
Hi, and I'm Ben Monroe, and I no sense to you at all. You're gonna love the first 15 minutes of this movie.
I love it.
Follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/horrornerdsatchurch. It starts at only $5 to sign up and get exclusive access to hours of bonus content, including BooTube episodes about TV shows, movie commentaries, bonus episodes, our video book episodes, and more.
For sure, for sure. Today we're going to talk about the much dreaded, maligned, infamous, I don't even know, Star Wars Holiday Special. Not the Star Wars Holiday Lego Special, which is better than this, believe it or not.
What a surprise that seems like.
Right? And as you have heard, we are joined by Ben Monroe, who is joining us for the fifth time, sixth, somewhere in there on the podcast. Ben spent lots and lots of times. Ben spent most of his life in Northern California, where he lives in the East Bay area with his family. He is the author of In the Belly of the Beast and Other Tales of Cthulhu Wars, The Seething, and the graphic novel Planet Apocalypse, and short stories in several anthologies. Welcome back.
Hey guys, nice to see you. Happy holidays, happy Life Day, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever makes you happy.
Yep.
Indeed. We are right in the middle of Advent Misspany for Baze and I.
Yep.
But yes, happy Life Day. I still don't know what it means, but maybe we'll figure it out during the episode.
It's because we are droids, so we do not have life. So we are so sad we cannot participate, as C-3PO says.
C-3PO with the lies. Lies, I tell you.
So,
oh my god.
We watched this, Emily and I watched this movie twice in the past 2 weeks for you all. So
Ta-da!
we're putting in our time.
I may have fallen asleep during the first one a couple times. The first one.
As one is prone to do with this.
Yeah.
But what beyond just sitting through this movie so we can record on it today, have y'all been watching anything spooky, anything holiday related, reading anything spooky or holiday related?
I have been reading Star Wars from a certain point of view, Return of the Jedi, which is probably not the right order for each of those phrases. But I've been watching a lot of holiday movies interspersed with Rustin about Bayard Rustin, and that movie is phenomenal.
Oh.
Phenomenal. Highly recommend for anyone. But also, I've been watching a variety of holiday movies because that's what I do and am allowed to do without question. And I've watched almost 50 so far.
Wow. I'm impressed.
I'm at 48. Depends on if you count Home Alone 2, which I fell asleep basically for the whole thing, except for the first.
Let me pull up my letterbox and see what I've been watching. This is your reminder that Emily and I and the podcast all have letterboxes, so you can check those out.
It's true.
Let's see. Yesterday I watched Saltburn, which just came out on Amazon Prime if you have access to that. Really good, dark, comedic twist and turn kind of drama film. Um Beyond that, I watched a few holiday movies, some with Emily. It's a Wonderful Knife, which came out this year. So
Which was
good on
phenomenal.
AMC
I
Plus or
loved
Shudder.
it.
Really funny.
So
Definitely
good.
highly recommend that for everyone.
Yeah.
It's a parody of It's a Wonderful Life, except turned into a slasher movie. It's really funny.
Nice.
And beyond that, I've been watching a lot of holiday movies, just like Emily. But new to me this year, for the first time, I watched Winnie the Pooh, A Very Merry Pooh Year, and I have to say, not good. Don't watch it.
It
Spoiler.
sounded cute for half a second.
What about you, Ben? Have you read any of the things?
Oh my gosh. So I haven't really watched much. Well, what have I been watching? I've been reading. I've been kind of on this weird uh, pulp fantasy kick lately. I've been
Ooh.
reading Edgar Rice Burroughs' Pellucidar novels, the Hollow Earth stories, which
Mm.
are interesting. I feel like I read the first one when I was a kid, many, many years ago, back in the dark ages. And so I managed to find like six of the seven, almost the complete series at the local used bookstore for like $1 each. I'm like, well, that's worth it. So that's been fun. Interesting. That's one of the kids asked me what I thought. I'm like, well, they're actually less misogynistic and racist than I was expecting. So that
Oh,
was
that's
pretty good.
always right. That's always a plus.
I mean,
Always
for
good.
pulp fantasy written in 1919, that's kind
Yeah.
of saying something. And I just started on a collection of Robert E. Howard's Cull stories. Howard was the author of Conan, was a contemporary of H.P. Lovecraft, and Cull was sort of the first fantasy character he wrote. So I started reading those the other
Yeah.
day. And what am I watching? I haven't had the brain space for movies lately. I've just been so tired from actual work. I
Me
started
too.
watching a show on Netflix that my kids had recommended a couple years ago called Hilda, which I'm really enjoying. It's not horror at all. It's I think it's rated Y7, so it's definitely geared toward kids. But I'm loving it. It's about a little blue-haired kid from the country who comes to the city of Trollberg and meets makes friends with elves and trolls and all the weird supernatural
Cool.
creatures
Oh,
that
cool.
live in the sewer. And it's fun. If you ever watched the show Gravity Falls,
Hmm.
it kind of reminds me of that in a little way. That it's definitely
Mm.
geared to kids, but adults can really enjoy it too. So that's what I've been doing.
One of these. Well, we'll have to add that to the list of potential boo tubes, but also Gravity Falls has long been on the list for a potential boo tube for Patreon. I love that show.
Yes.
I've not seen it, either of them.
Oh, it's so much fun.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think that entire series I've watched maybe 3 or 4 times with my kids, and
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's a good time.
Nice.
Well, it's okay if you don't have any new ones, and we'll just skip it. But as we always ask our guests, do you have any real life church horror stories? Since you've been on the podcast like five sometimes, you're probably reaching the bottom of the barrel there
I
for
mean, does the
new
horror
stories.
ever end?
Well, yes,
No,
that's fair.
I feel like if maybe back when we did the Halloween show, like actually Halloween Ends, not the Halloween show,
Hmm.
but Halloween Ends, almost a year ago, I mentioned that I was on my church's governing board and we were dealing with stuff. And it's been a year and a half, and I feel like we're still dealing with the same stuff and the same complainers and grousers. And so it's not really so much a church horror story as a church ongoing saga, I guess. But I don't
That's
really want to
real.
dwell on that. It's almost Christmas, and I'm just going
Mm.
to think happy thoughts this week.
Happy thoughts. Happy thoughts. Well, um, we're the other question we're going to be asking all of our guests during the Star Wars season. And also we'll ask the question for aliens too. But what was the first time or your first memory of watching Star Wars? Your first exposure to the franchise?
Is that for me or for Emily?
That's for
Emily's
you.
probably already done that. Oh my gosh, I have actually like very specific early memories of Star Wars. Now I'll back it up a second, and the prop's going to come into play here in a minute. Um, so I'm Gen X. You know, I'm older Gen X. I was of the age when Star Wars was the thing, right? You know, I remember being about 6 years old and a fantasy nut. You know, I was grew up reading fairy tales and fun stuff. You know, just interesting, weird stuff. Loving monsters. I was totally into the Ray Harryhausen movies. I just read The Hobbit for the first time. This was second
Mm.
grade. This was all kind of rolling together. I was 1977, 76 was a very good year for me. I kind of peaked then.
So much truth in
And
that statement for so many of us.
right. And so I just read The Hobbit, which spurred me on to reading Le Guin's Earthsea books, and like anything
Mm.
that smacked of fantasy, I was there. Whatever, you know, even stuff I like. I was clearly too young to read or couldn't quite get it. Whatever.
Mhm.
So I see a poster in the what do you call it, the foyer, the lobby for our local neighborhood movie theater for this upcoming film called Wizards by Ralph Bakshi. Right, it's an animated film, post-apocalyptic fantasy. It turns out, but all I saw was wizards. Wizards. That sounds. I don't know what that's about, but it says wizards on it, and there's a weird monster. I'm dragging my dad. I made my dad take me to see this movie, and the movie was fine. I've gone back and watched it many times over the years. Ralph Bakshi was kind of a visionary in many ways for animation, but my memory, this circling back to the point,
Mhm.
the main thing I remember is the trailers and seeing that first trailer for Star Wars. And all I knew was it was space stuff and there was a Wolfman in it, right? I mean, I didn't know.
Chewie!
Chewbacca's there. I don't know what the hell a Chewbacca is or a Wookiee. And
Yeah.
they didn't even say, just like one shot of him making this Wookiee noise or whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I was totally into the Wolfman. It was my favorite monster at the time. Like, it's a Wolfman in a space movie. I have to see this damn thing, right? So so it's coming out, and we're starting to see more trailers and ad spots for it. And I'm getting so excited. It's coming May 25th, 1977. You know, can't get there soon enough. Now, this is so I'm getting totally into it. Really want to see this movie. Now, I grew up in Berkeley. That says a lot right there. In the 70s, my parents both worked for the university, and they were, you know, very academically minded people. They decided when they found out there was a book, a novelization of Star Wars, that they wouldn't take me to see the movie until I finished reading reading the book. It made me read the damn book first, right?
Oh, wow.
So I didn't actually get to see Star Wars. I think they finally took me for my birthday in August. But, and here's my prop, right? I still have that copy of the Star Wars novelization by
I love
George
it.
Lucas. Actually, Alan Dean Foster, we found out Ghost read it, or Ghost wrote it. You know, it's kind of
Yeah.
old. So I read this thing probably, you know, a bunch and had little pictures. You kind of imagine, you know, and for those of you who are, you know, listening and not watching this, I'm showing off this book here with the pictures, but you can go on eBay and find a copy of that. So
But the book was written based on the movie,
based
right?
on the screenplay, right? So there's actually like subtle differences, you know, between when the book was sent to press and when the movie finally actually was released to theaters. A few
Hmm.
things changed here and there.
Yeah.
The whole scene, I'm sure everyone knows about it, with Luke and Biggs. You know, when they have their conversation, then Biggs is going to jump ship and go join the academy. That's actually in the novel. And
Ah.
there's a whole different prelude talking about Emperor Palpatine and all this stuff. So it's kind of interesting. But anyway, so those are my long rambling first thoughts about Star Wars. And then I finally saw the movie and it blew my mind. And I think I went back and saw it 6 times that summer or something.
It's
Nice.
amazing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I just think it's hilarious the like you have to read the book before the movie, even though the book was based on the screenplay for the movie. Like,
Right, right.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's, you know,
that's funny.
Berkeley in the 70s. What can I tell you? It was a whole different world in many
Yeah.
ways.
Indeed.
And then my next question is, you have worked for Lucasfilm briefly in the 90s. What was that like? How did that happen? Tell me all the things. And I know you were doing a little bit of work for the special editions or something like that, if I'm remembering
Right,
correctly. So
right. So so I guess that love of Star Wars and movies and whatnot, carried with me for a long time. At least we're I think we're fast forwarding to '93 here, so at least 15 years, right? So I went to college. I got a degree in film from San Francisco State. Um, and while I was there, I started hearing about the ILM, or the Lucasfilm internship program, which was something that anybody could do. Um, well, it was actually really hard to get into, so not anybody could do it. Um, but I sort of focused my studies on doing that in my final semester. I figured it was a crapshoot. Hardly any. I mean, I didn't know anybody at school who had actually managed to get the internship. Um, but I worked towards doing that in my last year, to the point where I freed up my whole schedule. So I only had like 3 classes my final semester, so that if I got the internship, I could spend as much time doing that as possible. And I did. I was fortunate enough to actually get the thing, um, kind of at the last minute. And so yeah, it was my last semester of college. I was probably spending, I don't know, 20, 25 hours a week at Lucasfilm, at ILM in their Marin County, effects lab. Um, and it just happened that I was there when they were starting to do, what they called at the time the special edition of Star Wars. Now it's just Star Wars: A New Hope, Episode 4 or whatever, where they were taking, uh, oh gosh, how do I describe? They were fixing stuff. Lucas, the special
Okay,
effects technology had come a long way.
is that when they changed the story so that Han did not shoot first?
Oh gosh, let's see. In the original, he shot first. Yes, in the
Mm-hmm.
special edition, he didn't shoot first. Greedo shot him first, and now I don't know. Like they shoot each other and then go
At the
out
same
for
time?
drinks or
Yeah,
something. It keeps changing. It's
true.
completely weird.
Yeah.
So maybe they didn't fix that part, but they fixed a lot of other things. I mean, Lucas thought they fixed stuff anyway. They added the Jabba the Hutt scene, which they had recorded, back in the olden
Mm-hmm.
days, and just didn't get in. And I do have actually there's a funny anecdote about that. So when when this was all going on, the reason they were doing the special edition is because Lucas was shooting forward about 6, 7 years, thinking it's about time to do some new Star Warses, right? He was starting to think about the prequel
Mm-hmm.
trilogy, and so they were beginning this whole reminding everyone about Star Wars ramp up, and the special editions were sort of the beginning of that. And then
Mm-hmm.
there was going to be some new novels and video games and stuff to tie in. And they did this thing, called the Star Wars Summit, where they brought people who had Star Wars licenses, game publishers, toy manufacturers, whatever. They all came to ILM, or Lucasfilm, and had a whole weekend where Lucas laid out the plan about, this is what we're planning on doing for the next few years until Episode 1 comes out. And as part of this, they had like a cocktail party at the end of the summit, right, where people would all get together and get to hang out and talk about how great George Lucas is. and, um, and they decided to take over one of the sound stages at Skywalker Ranch and basically dress it up with props from the Mos Eisley Cantina. So have this cocktail party set in like the cantina,
Nice.
right?
Yeah.
And then I don't know how all this came together, but they got a bunch of us, and like random people fitted us for costumes and had us hang out in Star Wars outfits, right? And so they took my measurements, and the guy said, "Man, we were going to have you be Boba Fett, but you're too tall. I was like an inch too tall to fit in the Boba Fett costume." I'm like, "Oh man, that really sucked." So they put me in. I think I was wearing like the skiff guard costume from Jedi, and then actually
Oh.
the actual trench coat that Harrison Ford wore had a tag on it that said Harrison, right? The Harrison Ford's commando trench coat from Jedi, from the Endor scenes. I'm like, that was pretty cool. So I got to wander around. I actually lost my voice. I had like laryngitis or something. So I created these little slips of paper, which was like rebel propaganda, and I would kind of sneak them by people and tuck them under their cocktail napkins and stuff, and that became pretty funny. Um, so then internship ends, everyone shakes hands, I leave, and I discover a few months later that when they were redoing that Jabba the Hutt scene in the special edition, they wanted to put Boba Fett into it, and they had already found a guy who they knew fit the Boba Fett costume. He was working in the computer games division, LucasArts,
Mm-hmm.
and like, hey, Fred, come over here and put this costume on and go walk that way and look, and he did that. So that guy, right? If I had been an inch shorter, that guy could
You
have been
would
me,
have been
because
Boba
they would have known that I fit
Right.
the costume. So that was one of my great disappointments in my life.
Oh, what
But
a
it was fun. No,
disappointment
the
proving
internship was a
something
lot of
good in
fun.
between.
You know, I got to my job specifically was to find all the original negative shots they were trying to change. I had this giant warehouse full of stuff, and I had to go through and find the original pieces of negatives so they could fix them up and update them and hand them off to the editors so they could do the actual work. So that was fun.
Nice. That sounds really cool. I Yeah. I mean, it sounds really cool in the like Star Wars nerdy way, and also there, like, it sounds like an internship in the other
Right.
way.
Right. Here, do this menial task, but you know, it's a menial Star Wars task, so at least I got a story out of it later, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the goal. Nice. That's
Uh,
awesome, though.
yeah.
So cool. Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll awkwardly transition because that's what we do here to the
Do-do-do-do-do-do.
the subject of today, which is Star Wars Holiday Special, directed by Steve Binder, released November 17th, 1978, on November 17th, 1978, and then never officially released again, ever. And 1978 was the year that the first Halloween film by John Carpenter came out, which you can hear us talk about for season 1 of the podcast. So it's our very first episode if you go onto our feed, because the episode that came out before that is now exclusive to Patreon supporters. um Also, Superman the movie came out that year. The animated Lord of the Rings came out, which is still a fun movie. I adore it.
Absolutely.
um The Omen 2, Jaws 2, and Grease all came out in 1978.
I've seen Grease.
Yay, you've
I,
seen one of them. um
I would like to point out, just to clarify, Pace, you mentioned that this I can't really even call it a show or a film. Or this thing was released on November 17th, 1978, and I would like to point out that this was released on November 17th, 1978, on purpose. Like someone actually decided this was a good idea.
yes.
Okay, and now back to you.
So, when was the first time you seen that? Did you actually happen to catch this when it was airing on CBS, Ben?
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, we were so excited. You know, we didn't have a VCR again because I'm old, right? We didn't have a
Mhm.
VCR. We didn't have the internet. You know, it was the '70s. We were bored. Anything that would like look like it would be interesting, you know, we had to watch it. And this was, oh my God, Star Wars. You know, we had just seen Star Wars, what, summer of 1977. So we're now shooting forward almost, you know, a year and a half, and all we were desperate for more Star Wars stuff. I was reading all the books, which maybe there was like two of them at that point, probably, you know, Star Wars and Splinter of the Mind's Eye. I was reading the comic books, anything I get my hands. I remember as a kid, I bought like the screenplay to Star Wars. I would just read it over and over again. You didn't have a VCR, you couldn't go back to the movies if it wasn't showing. Read the script, whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And oh my God! And this new Star Wars thing is coming out, and we were waiting for it. We were so excited, and again, you're sitting around the TV, November 17th, whatever time it was, you know, 1978, and and you're watching it. And I remember, like, this is a long time ago, but I still remember this palpable feeling of disappointment growing. You know, the further we got into it, you know,
Aw.
even like I'm trying to convince myself, but it's still Star Wars. It still could be good, but maybe after this ad, maybe the next segment will be good. And then there's like a brief moment of completely not terribleness when the Boba Fett cartoon comes out. I know it's they have a name for it, something like the helpful Wookiee companion or
Yeah,
something,
the
but
faithful
we,
Wookiee, I think.
you know, that's the one. I still just think of it as the Boba Fett part. You know, that was the
Yeah,
good part.
I haven't seen that because I forgot to watch it last night.
yeah.
Because I ran out
The
of space.
version we watch. So, if you're listening at home and want to know where you can watch this abysmal thing, first don't. But if you really insist or are a completionist, you can find it on the internet. Like it's on YouTube and stuff. But uh because of copyright infringement, if you find it on the internet, you can buy like DVD bootlegs and Blu-ray bootlegs, which will have the whole thing on it and stuff. But the ones you can find on the internet to avoid copyright cut out the Star Wars theme at the end, so it's just like quiet for a while, and they also cut out the only good part, which is the Boba Fett cartoon, because that's now on Disney Plus. So they would get flagged for
Right.
copyright if that was on it. So,
Mm-hmm.
Which is
but
funny that they wouldn't get flagged for copyright for any of the rest of it, right? Because nobody really wants to take the blame.
right, yeah.
Uh,
So take your drink for Emily, because first time,
The
right?
first time I watched it was like a week ago when Pace and I watched it the first time together. And then I watched it again last night and was awake for the whole thing.
Yay.
And subjected friend of the podcast, River, who is visiting, to it as well. She was very gracious about it.
Yeah. We were in a group chat, and I think by the end of it, River and I were both lamenting that we were nowhere near high enough to have sat through that.
I have a phrase I use sometimes talking about a 3B movie, 3 beers and it's a good movie. And I really don't know how many it would take. I think by the time I had
I feel
hit,
like more than 3.
alcohol positivity on this film, I would probably be falling asleep. So
Yeah.
I may as well just go to sleep at that point.
Yep.
Yeah. I watched this for the first time probably in college, like a bootleg VHS that like, have you ever seen the holiday special? And of course, by that point, it was like it especially in the early days of the internet, which I would say from like very early 90s through early 2000s, that like first decade of it starting to become a thing, just like the online forums and rumor mill of the internet thing. And so like me being a Star Wars film, like, had researched so much about the Star Wars Holiday Special, because it's like this holy grail thing you can't find anywhere because it's never been officially
Mm-hmm.
released. So everyone's like, "What is this cool thing? We need to like." So like, finally in college, I had a friend who just happened to have a VHS bootleg. I was like, "Do you want to watch it?" I was like, "Yes." I watched it. I was like, "Oh, that's why it's been." There's an attempt to erase it from the face of the planet.
Right.
Um, so a little bit of a disappointment there, but I must have watched it like 2 or 3 times over my life until this past month when I watched it twice for this. So,
Yeah, and now we've watched it, and we're doing a podcast episode on it, so we don't need to do it again.
right? Just like the 2 Ewoks holiday specials, which you've already recorded and you can find on Patreon shortly.
I
So,
was going to mention, I mean, Lucasfilm even put out the Ewok movies on VHS and DVD, and
right?
they still wouldn't put out the holiday specials. So, I mean,
I mean,
that says a lot.
that makes sense to me, having seen all 3 different ones. Like, yeah, okay, that tracks.
So
Oh my gosh.
I have a little bit behind the scenes here for this one, before we get into talking about it. But Star Wars, of course, as you heard Ben talk about, just this global phenomenon after it was initially released and hit theaters and stuff, and just so much desire for more content. And I know like Kenner was producing toys and stuff like that. There are comic books. There are the 2 books you talked about, the novelization and Splinter in Mind's Eye. And I think the Han Solo's Revenge came out a year after that, so like another year before
Something
that
like that.
book.
Yeah.
But but just this craving for more content. And so Star Wars characters had been appearing on various shows and character as promotion for the first film, like on late night shows and stuff like that. And apparently this inspired CBS to approach George Lucas with doing a holiday special for their network. And they were like, sure. Lucasfilm was initially involved. They helped draft an initial script. And Lucas himself was the one who came up with the idea of like trying to get Chewie home to celebrate Life Day. But due to their work on Empire Strikes Back, which would come out 2 years later, and they were like heavy in pre-production at this point, they basically like did some initial work on it, then handed the reins to CBS and let CBS run with it and keep out of the development of it. And if you listen to our Ewok special episode, which will come out, I think February or something like that on Patreon,
Yeah.
you can hear some more about that.
For our horror buffs,
Yes, horror buffs. The
which is
$10
our $10
tier.
Patreon level.
But you can learn some of the lessons that they had, mainly George Lucas realizing I need to have a little bit tighter control on Star Wars because I can't just let other people take it and run with it because it did not turn out well. Um,
Did not.
it was poorly received. It was only broadcast once, never rebroadcast, never received an official release, with the exception of the Faithful Wookiee anime segment, which you can find on Disney Plus under the Star Wars, was it
Vintage.
retro vintage, yeah, the Star Wars vintage nomiker. There's also the legend about Luke's face after the accident he was in. He was in a car accident. Um, and so he was still healing from that accident when this was filmed, which is one of the reasons why he has such a small part, even though he was the main character of the first film. And even in the really like jaunted ass version we were watching, super pixelated and stuff, like you can tell like his face does not look natural, the amount of makeup and stuff they put to cover like the reconstructive surgery and stuff he had.
Right.
And that's also the legend behind why he got hit by the Wampa in episode 5 Empire Strikes Back, was to give a reason for why his face might look a little bit different in Empire Strikes Back. Um, and then also the Boba Fett segment seems to be the only one that anybody likes still. The Faithful Wookiee segment, and it inspired a rocket launching toy that Kenner produced, but never actually released. So it's like this holy grail toy where there's only so many of these toys that were prototypes or initial run that were made. And so if you go and watch, what is that show on Netflix, The Toys That Made Us, they have this whole segment on the Boba Fett rocket firing toy that was supposed to come out and then never did because of safety reasons. But it was inspired by this as well. Also, this is the first time James Earl Jones is credited as the voice of Darth Vader. He was not credited in A New Hope, or at that point, Star Wars, as it was only called.
Which is rude.
Right?
I mean, also, unsurprising given who they are. Also, R2D2 as R2D2.
Yeah, crediting R2D2 as R2D2. Kind of cute,
Like, I
though.
like it, and also, I'm not sure about it. And also, that means that when C3PO lies about them not being alive, he's really lying about R2D2. If R2D2 is playing R2D2 in the show, then clearly R2D2 is alive to be acting.
Absolutely.
The logic.
Well, I do wonder now that I'm thinking about it. I have no idea. I wonder maybe if Kenny Baker was even in the suit at that point.
Yeah,
Maybe he was like the one smart one who refused to be in it.
I was just thinking that too. Like maybe they
Screw you
just had,
guys.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, yeah. That's also what I was wondering. It's like, that's weird.
Maybe Kenny Baker
Also,
was busy doing Time Bandits at that point or something. Who knows?
it's possible. Also, all of the sponsors and ads and stuff, I was like, oh, I remember those days, which are unfortunately coming back to haunt us with, capitalism version 90 million point 56.
yay.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Any other background behind the scenes that y'all know about? I don't.
Yeah, the only thing I can really think of, Pace, you were talking about how Lucasfilm was really deep into working on Empire at that point. Um, I remember I read the biography of George Lucas, Skywalking, years ago, and that was pretty current as of up to about the late '80s, early '90s. And one of the things they talked about was right about that time, '78 or so. So Lucas had done the original Star Wars very much in tandem with 20th Century Fox, right? They paid the budget, and he, I think, gave up his directing fee in order to keep the merchandising revenue, which was nobody had ever seen that before, and that was a genius move on his part. When they did Empire, he was trying to fund the whole thing himself. He was not getting any money from outside sources. He was taking his entire Star Wars pot and throwing it into Empire. And so I remember reading in that book how completely stressed, running on fumes he was. And there's a kind of a feud began between him and Francis Ford Coppola, because Coppola was trying to get Lucas to give him some money to make a movie. Hey, fund my whatever, I don't know how Peggy Sue got married or something weird. And Lucas is like, sorry, I got no money. Sorry, go away. And
Busy. Come back later.
and they, yeah, basically, and they had been friends for so long. Coppola was sort of a mentor to Lucas at the beginning of his career. That kind of was a schism until later when he realized that the reason that Lucas said he didn't have any money when he was sitting on that big pot of Star Wars money was because he was trying to do Empire on his own. And all his money was going into that. And so I can see that basically at some point someone comes along and says, "Hey, we'll give you $10 if you let us make this holiday special." Lucas like, $10, sure, that'll feed like 5 guys at craft services. Great, let's do it. Do whatever you want. You put B. Arthur and Harvey Korman in Star Wars costumes. Awesome, sounds great. Give me $10.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's my thought on it.
Yeah. No, that's good. I was not alive at that time, so I have no information about it. But it's cool to like figure out. Like my intro to Star Wars, we had the VHS, the original trilogy on VHS, at our house, and I remember going to one of the prequel movies with my dad and talking about when he went to the original series in theaters.
Nice.
But yeah, so it's fun to hear like other people's experiences who actually like were alive and into Star Wars at the time.
Right.
That stuff happened. But yeah.
Interesting time.
Indeed. Speaking of one sentence summaries, what exactly did we just watch? Mine is Life Day involves candles and requires family.
Yay.
That's what I got out of it. Pace?
Just don't. That's my one sentence summary.
And I would summarize this as I'm sure it seemed like a good idea to somebody.
Yeah, pretty much. That about sums it up, I think.
Yeah.
I should probably also mention, we started talking about this, Pace, and Emily asked me to watch the movie, and I refused. And and the reason for that is because, excuse me, I did see it when it first came out, like Pace. I think I watched it again in the 90s. And I just watched it a few years ago when my kids were little, because they really wanted to watch it. And I thought it would be funny to make them watch it. And I've decided that about every 20 years is enough for me. And so I think I'm about 5 or 6 years out from wanting to watch it again.
That's fair. More than fair.
Yeah. I don't blame you.
Well, I guess getting into it, I can start off by saying the music is so bad. There's like a few, they're trying to do like a Christmas variety show, I think, is like what the hope is, but a Star Wars version of it, it's not great. Ian Fraser took the
what they're doing.
John Williams Star Wars theme and like repurposed it to make the score, and then Ken Welch and Mitzi Welch did the songs. We hear a few songs that are sung that just randomly happen and are not good songs. The music is really not good, and that's one of the sad things.
Even
is like
I know the music is not good. That's when you know it's bad, is when I'm like,
But I think part of it though is just, John Williams at the beginning of his career and stuff, but still like just writing such iconic score for the first Star Wars movie that really was part of the magic of that movie. And then you hire somebody else to try to replicate that, and it's just not going to be as good, especially when you try to turn it into like some holiday jingles singing about like Bay Arthur song about like goodbye but not forever, or whatever her weird song she was singing in the cantina was.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, that horrible Casablanca thing. Poor John Williams.
I could not even figure out what was going on that one. I was like, wait, is this on TV? Is this I thought it was in real life, but then I thought it was on TV, and I could not.
Yeah.
Could not tell.
The framing narrative, for those of you who don't want to watch this, good for you. Don't. But the framing narrative is basically Han Solo and Chewbacca are trying to get home so Chewie can spend it with his family for Life Day. They get into some like Imperial entanglements and get delayed. So while they're waiting for him to come home, his son Itchy is
Itchy's the grandpa. I think Lumpy
and
is the
she's the
son.
grandpa. Lumpy is the son. Okay. His son Lumpy is watching TV and like legit, just this my reference in the beginning when I said I'm the set designer who thought it was okay to just put a TV in there, like just an actual TV, not a view screen or anything, just flipping through channels and comes across some random things, one of which being Bay Arthur singing. Another one is the animated segment about the Boba Fett introduction animated segment. So there are some like
Oh,
TV
that's how they
pieces
justified that.
segments that are just random, like a cooking show segment that Mala, who is Chewie's wife, watches as she's trying to cook for Life Day and stuff like that. It's just really
Now,
interesting concept.
Yeah.
and how come the mom doesn't get a stupid name? You got
Right.
Chewy, Itchy, and Lumpy, and then Mala. Shouldn't she be like, I don't know, stinky or greasy or something? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
Yeah.
oh my god.
I I think my favorite of the like skit, like the short things on the TV, was the cooking one though, because it reminded me of the camp skit that we used to do where like one person is there and
Right,
puts their hands behind their back, and there's another person behind them who puts their arms through, and then they try to like have a date or do or put on makeup or get ready for the day or whatever, and you have like somebody who can't see being the hands for the person whose head
right.
can see. And
Yep.
that's, I was like, this is like that but like leveled up because now you got like your own and another one.
Hmm. Swedish chef in it
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
Muppets.
it's true because the Swedish Chef is actually, real quick, the Swedish Chef in the Muppets is actually done, was originally done by Jim Henson and Frank Oz. So Frank
Right.
Oz was the hands and Jim Henson was the head, and so had to like it was improv acting, right? Like whatever the
Hmm.
hands did, the chef's head
Right.
had to like, and words had to like follow.
And let's also point out for those people who are smart enough not to watch this, who don't know, the first, I think it's like the first 15 minutes of this damn thing are all in Wookiee. The dialogue is all grunts and honks and hoots, and you can kind of infer what's going on, but it's basically,
That's
the mom
all
is
good,
is
yeah.
preparing for her absentee husband to come home for Life Day, for the first time in whatever, and trying to get Lumpy to do the chores or something, and he wants to watch TV. And who knows? No one in the house is helping, right? Lumpy is watching TV. Grandpa's watching porn in the other room.
Right.
Let's just cut to the chase.
Yep.
Yeah.
And all of this is in what Shirowook is the name of the Wookiee language, right? So all this is done in the Wookiee, and oh, it's just so terrible.
Well, and like part of me is like, okay, how did they actually decide on the Wookiee language? Because is it really you just make whatever sounds you want with the intonation that is acceptable? Because then that's pretty handy because any Wookiee doesn't really have to memorize lines. They just have to know what they are doing and have like some sense of like who they're communicating, like when they communicate and who they communicate with. And that seems like both an easier and a harder way of acting.
Mm. Hmm. Hmm.
Well, I know there's some, you can find them online, some cuts from some of the Star Wars films. The one I remember is from Empire, where they had actually scripted dialogue for Chewbacca. Like when Chewbacca was talking to Han Solo, you can hear Peter Mayhew, "Oh, I can't find the hydro compressor in the thing," whatever. He's actually talking, and they're having a conversation. And then, at least in Empire and the other ones, the good Star Warses, uh, they had then sent this off to, I guess it was Ben Burt was the sound designer, to create the Wookiee language, which I remember hearing was a combination of sounds from a Kodiak bear, a Komodo dragon, and I think a dog or something. So they kind of blended all that together. So when they're acting, they're actually saying stuff and having actual dialogue happening, and then
Okay.
it's the sound designer's job to then make up this Wookiee stuff. And so I'm assuming that's what they did in the holiday special as well. But
That's
I just remember,
fascinating.
yeah, no, it's really interesting. Sound design's a super
Yeah.
fascinating field. But I just remember watching this damn thing. I'm gonna keep calling it this damn thing, right? Watching this
Do
thing,
it.
and you keep like waiting to understand what the hell is happening. Like maybe someone who speaks basic will show up in the next few minutes and start talking. We know no, it's just it keeps going in Wookiee for it's at
Hmm.
least the first 15 minutes. If it's not 15 minutes, it sure as hell felt like 15 minutes at least.
I mean, there's easily more than 15 minutes of just Wookiee, of just Shriwook.
Right.
So, yeah. Yeah. It was, yeah. I think is part of why I fell asleep the first time was that it was just Wookiees talking to each other, and yeah. Like,
Not even like subtitles, so you don't even really know what they're saying. It's just
Right.
mhm.
They're just kind of grunting around.
Although I would be interested to see like the subtitles that they would come up with. I'm always disappointed by subtitles whenever there's more than one language, because usually whatever language is the second language, instead of actually putting it in with that language, they just put speaking foreign language or speaking this language. And I'm like, no,
Unhelpful.
like it's not that hard
Right.
to get yes, you have to pay a little bit more because you need a person who speaks that language to do those particular lines, but they're in the script anyway.
Right.
Mhm, mhm.
But to write out Wookiee, I don't know. I don't know if they have the same alphabet or not.
Yeah,
That's a good question.
that gets me to something that I forgot to put in the notes, but something that just kind of shows the evolution of the Star Wars world is the amount of English language that text that appears in the special. Like they're watching TV and it'll just say, there's like a loading screen. It said loading, just like in English text, Roman letters. And so this was before the development of Arabesh, which is the fictional writing alphabet of the basic Star Wars universe, basic
Right.
language. And so, and if you go back, so part of the thing, one of the things the special edition fixed was removing a lot of the English language from A New Hope to make it in line with Empire Strikes Back and the ones that came after they had developed Arabesh. But if you go back to like the original theatrical version, you can see like some English language here and there in the thing, and like on the console of the Death Star, there's labels for what the some of the buttons do and stuff like that in English. So
Blow up planet.
right, blow up planet, big red button right here.
Dun, dun. Mhm.
um, I do want to mention the Faithful Wookiee. I will say if you have time, you can watch it. It's not that bad, and the animation style is bonkers. I particularly like the animation style for Han Solo. He just looks so weird. It's like a caricature more than an actual like
Yeah.
cartoon version. But Boba Fett, like, I have no idea how Luke or any of them thought Boba Fett was a good guy. Basically, the thing is they team up with Boba Fett to find Han Solo, but of course, Boba Fett is secretly working for Darth Vader. And
That
how
tracks.
they thought Boba Fett was the good guy because he is like the biggest jerk from the beginning. Like he's abusing the animal he's riding in on. He's like talking back to Luke, and it's just uh,
It's also funny to think back how much they were pushing the Boba Fett. This was this segment that we're going to introduce this brand new character who's going to be a big part in the next movie. And you mentioned that action figure. I remember buying the toys as a kid, and you had to save these little proof of purchase coupons. And when you saved up enough of them, you would send them in and get a free Boba Fett action figure. And they really presented Boba Fett like he was going to be this big thing, and then he has like what 2 lines of dialogue in Empire, and then dies in Return of the Jedi, ignominiously. And it wasn't until like 40 years later when like, oh fuck it, let's just give him a show.
yep.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
people still loved him. He was still
Hmm.
like this fan favorite character, despite the fact that he never did anything.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just
I,
weird.
I mean, that's what happens with. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of weird things, that Life Day celebration, huh? Oh. Yeah. That was almost a good transition. I almost had it.
It
I
was
like
good.
I
It was
like the
good.
part I like the part when Princess Leia showed up to this planet and completely, takes over this indigenous celebration and just decides to sing the Life Day song. It kind of it's like a Kanye West Taylor Swift moment. It's like, come
Right?
on, Leia, get out of here. This is not about you.
Right, but like also agreed, and also there's like
Plus,
a so first off, why are there words in Galactic Basic to this song? That makes no sense. But also, like, the way that they crashed it was like ever so slightly not the worst, right? So like they come and they crash it, and C3PO is weird, and then Leia just sings the song that's not the song, that's like not the actual song. But there's this moment where she says, "This is not our day. This is your day to celebrate and honor life and whatever. And we can wish those things with you." And I really liked that part because I think, especially right now, there are so many Christians in particular who are trying to co opt Judaism, especially,
mm,
and say, we're going to light the menorah, we're going to blow on a shofar. Like, and it's like, no, this is your day. These are your traditions. And we can like hold those values with you and respect your traditions without making them our own. The part where it falls short, right, is that Leia takes the song and that sort of thing, where it's like, follow through
Right.
on your words a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But
right.
yeah, it did feel like churchy. I was like, look, they've got candles, processional, they've got
Yep.
fancy albs and just like fancy word for robes that you wear,
Yeah.
and a liturgy that I don't know because I don't speak Shriwook.
Let's take
Yet.
a candlelit Christmas Eve service and water it down so it can still kind of work in the Star Wars universe without offending anybody who may not be Christian.
Right.
We'll replace Silent Night with Leia singing.
Perfect. Perfect.
Uh,
Yeah. I mean, my least favorite part about the Life Days, like the Life Day celebration specifically, was when C3PO was like, hello, we bring greetings, and R2D2 and I are just so ever so disappointed that we are not alive to be able to celebrate Life Day with you. And I was like, and then R2D2 pipes up, and I expected R2D2 to be like, speak for yourself. I'm plenty
mhm.
alive. But he did not,
Well, he
that
might
we
have.
know of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
C3PO
Again,
did not
I don't
again,
understand
lack of
binary,
subtitles.
so yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Um,
on this
if you,
podcast, we
yes,
do believe that droids can have the force.
and go to
Um,
heaven. All droids go to heaven.
yeah,
Expect a merch shirt soon as I finish. I did a rough draft of it. I just need to
yeah.
like color it in.
The
So
rough
it'll be a
draft
merch
looks
shirt to go with it.
amazing.
But yeah, that line comes from our uh Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view episode, which is
We'll drop
in a
soon.
weird twist of fate is going to drop after this, even though we
Yeah,
was originally recorded
maybe
before and it's going to come out before.
on New Year's or something. I don't
Maybe
know.
we'll see.
Who
Whenever
knows?
it paces time to edit it.
Yeah,
That's like a 2.5 hour long episode, though. It's gonna take a while.
that's because it's so good.
Emily and I talk too much.
Define too much. It's kind of the job of the podcast.
Yes, fair.
Yeah,
I
I
say
haven't read that book
as
yet, but I'd
lieutenant.
love to. I got to get those point of view books one of these days.
Yeah, they are so good. I love them. Um,
I
yeah.
recently kind of tangent, started getting into the current canon of Star Wars novels. I've been kind of reading them haphazardly, picking them up here and there, and I've actually been surprised at how good all of them are. I haven't. I've only read. I should say only. I've read like a dozen of them at this point,
Mm.
and I haven't hit a bad one yet. I read the Chuck Wendig's Aftermath trilogy. I thought was a lot of fun. Um, Lords of the Sith, which is a story about Vader and Palpatine having crash landed on a planet somewhere off the middle of nowhere. I wasn't expecting to like because I wasn't really into the idea of a Star Wars book from the perspective of the bad guys. But it wasn't really from their perspective. It just kind of kept cutting to them, and it had like this, I don't know, a smuggler from Ryloth who was like working for the rebels. It was his main story. And when Vader came out, holy crap! The first scene. Have you read this one? Either of you?
I
The
have,
first
yeah.
chapter, that opening scene when Vader, uh, gosh, what like he boards a ship with his bad, super stormtroopers or whatever, and you're only hearing it from people listening into the distress call, like screaming and yelling, and it's like Jason Voorhees level of carnage when Vader comes onto the ship. It's actually kind of terrifying. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so those certain point of view books, those are on my list, and I'll get to them at one of these days.
I
So
I really like them precisely because they are not the main characters, and so you get like,
right,
and they're actually like really creative with some of who they're whose point of views they're
Yeah.
going from, which is awesome.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yep.
in the old canon, or not really the canon, I guess they call it the extended universe now. There was a series of anthologies, the Tales from,
mm,
which were a lot like that. Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, from Cloud City, and Jabba's Palace, and each one took
Mm.
like that scene, the Mos Eisley Cantina scene, and focused on one background character and
oh nice,
everything that got them to that moment when Luke and Han showed up at the thing. It's like how some random guy intersected with the main story of Star Wars. And those were a
hmm
lot of fun.
Mm.
yeah, yeah. There's all of those have at least one story. Um, that's like that. It doesn't do all the way back, but sometimes it does, and then sometimes it goes a little bit forward too. So you
Mhm.
can
Nice.
like have them in your.
My favorite stories are the ones that take the nameless creatures that just appear to be antagonists and gives them
Mm-hmm.
agency and story. Like the trash compactor monster in the first one gets a story and from a certain point of view, and uh, the
But they,
Sarlacc pit gets a story in Return of the Jedi. Just fun stuff like that.
yeah,
Nice.
there are a bunch of animals on Hoth or creatures on Hoth that get it in Empire. Yeah.
Um, the other
So,
thing yeah,
tune in for that episode to hear
tune
more.
in, yeah, or and go back to listen to our A New Hope one that's already out,
Mm-hmm.
and our episode where we interview Claudia Gray, which is really fun having a
That's true. Yeah.
bona fide Star Wars canon author on the pod. Um,
Oh, she wrote Bloodlines, the Princess Leia novel,
yep,
which I just read a few weeks ago and absolutely loved. That was great.
Yeah.
Go
yeah,
Claudia. I don't know who I haven't met you, but I'm sure you're awesome and your book was awesome if you're listening
she
to this.
really is awesome. It was
She was
so
really fun to
awesome.
have on the podcast. Yeah.
I my favorite book of her Bloodlines is fantastic, but I love her Master and Apprentice book. So if you haven't read that one yet, Ben, I recommend that one. It tells the story of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon's relationship before the events of Phantom Menace.
I
Really
did
good.
read that one. That was actually the first of the whole series. I'd forgotten it was her, and I thought that was really. I love the tension between the two that
Yeah,
they created or she created.
same. Um, the other thing I want to talk about for um, deep theological discussion from this is how sex work exists in the Star Wars universe, and we
Mm-hmm.
see Itchy, as Ben said, essentially watching porn, or like one of those. I was thinking more like one of those like 1-800 numbers that you would call in and
Yeah.
have a fantasy sex workers talk with you and stuff through. But I'm all for like I'm pro sex work and stuff like that, but given how capitalistic the Star Wars universe is and how slavery exists and stuff, it's like extra icky in that universe.
Mm-hmm.
And especially considering that this is the only Black woman that has dialogue in the original trilogy and extended stuff, if I remember correctly, and she's a sex worker who's just trying to help get Itchy off, I guess, well, instead of helping him prepare for Life Day.
Right.
But like not just that, right? Like it is this fantasy of a Wookiee for a Black humanoid, probably human person who's speaking basic galactic, and he's doing it all in the living room
Right?
while everybody
Like,
else
seriously,
is around.
go to the bathroom or something. Get out of here, Grandpa, you creep.
And they call it the brain evaporator.
It's definitely evaporating something. Not sure if it's his brain.
Yeah. Like I
Ugh.
liked the kaleidoscopy thing at the beginning, and then it got into that, and I was just like, I don't know about this. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of somebody at one point I saw an interview. Someone asked Carrie Fisher about her memories of the thing, and basically she said something to the effect of, "I was so fried on coke when I was making that thing that I don't even remember shooting the thing."
Yeah.
And
That's what Faye said when we were watching.
Yeah.
right.
And I was
And I
like,
mean,
Luke is high on painkillers, Leia's high on coke. Like half the cast is out for the count for this.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. The other piece for me that I come up against a lot in the Star Wars universe, especially the like original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. But the like Luke is such a stereotypical cishet white guy. No offense, but
No worries.
like the like talking to Mala, blaming, like he's like R2D2 is trying to get his attention because something's going wrong, and he's like, no, this is important, never mind. And then when he finally notices the thing going wrong, he blames R2D2 for it, and he's
Right.
just like, why didn't you? And it's like,
Why didn't you tell me that whatever, my
R2D2
hydro spanner was?
didn't tell you. Yeah. And then he also like
Blame
tops it
R2.
off by like telling a legitimately worried family to calm down.
All right.
And I'm just like, and then we get the like traitor person and his like old white guyness where he's a terrible spy.
Oh, that was Art Carney, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And he's like, the shaggy carpet that was knitted by hand Solo.
Yeah. Hands alone. You could almost say Solo. Wink. It's like, oh my
He's
god.
like, get it? Got it? And they're like, no. And then he's like, but did you really get it? It's like,
Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Right.
yeah.
And that's one of the other things about this show that's sort of fascinating. I mean, so musical variety, that was a big thing back in the 70s, right? You had the Donnie and Marie show. The Muppets grew out of the musical comedy.
Yeah.
Lawrence Welk, Johnny Cash had a musical variety show. I mean, everyone had a musical variety show. So marrying musical variety slash comedy, sketch comedy slash Star Wars, it's almost like this microcosm of everything pop culture in the 70s. You know, like the Jefferson Starship came on and sang a song or something, and how it turned into like a steak a la mode moment, right? Like take steak, take ice cream. They're pretty good by themselves, but when you stick it all together, it's terrible. Keep your ice cream off my steak. And then, the last time I watched, one of the things that really struck me is you got Art Carney, you got Harvey Korman, you got B. Arthur. I mean, these are comic geniuses, and how much work did they have to do to go out of their way to make all of them not funny at all?
Right?
To make you feel like cringe, as they say, for Harvey Korman. It's like, Harvey Korman, he worked with Carol Burnett. He's one of the funniest people who ever lived. And now you're just like, oh God, Harvey, stop. Don't pour that beer in your head. That's just, no, that's too much.
Yeah. Yeah. That one like just made no sense to me. I was like, is he a robot? is he? What is going? It just yeah.
And for those who haven't seen it, there's a scene when Harvey Korman goes to the bar as an alien with a hole in the top of his head where he can drink, and it's about as funny as that sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bay
It's
Arthur
just
literally just like takes a pitcher and just pours it
I,
in.
I do think the trader guy, like his one redeeming quality, right, is that once the Empire arrives at the Chewbacca family home, at Mala's home, um, he does use his privilege and his power as a like humanoid old cishet white guy for good, right? Like he buddies up to them to like distract them and make them leave the Wookiees alone, or to like pretend like the one who died escaped and
Right.
ran away. Um, and so like that was I was like, okay, at least like if you're gonna be such a stereotype, which Luke always is, but then like also this other guy, at least you know that there is a thing that you can do with that privilege and that power that
Mhm.
helps and supports other people and the resistance in general. It's just like, okay,
Yay.
it's not bad. But yeah, it's I mean the whole Star Wars is a little bit of that. And I feel like it's kind of like we talk about the Bible being inspired by God, that it's like the amazing things are when other stuff's like manages to make it through all of the like sexism, misogyny, white supremacy, all of that, and then you get like this glimpse of like using your privilege for good, or we can't we like this day is not for us, but we can share in your values for this day. But
Right.
like,
Hey, sweetheart.
yeah, it'd be nice if C-3PO, for example, spoke Shriwook instead of just
Instead of
understanding
just
it.
basic. Yeah.
Yeah, like he
I mean,
understands all these languages, but does he communicate in them? No, he
6
just
million
trusts.
forms of communication, and he can't speak Shriwook. Rude. Or
right.
won't speak Shriwook. Who knows,
Won't.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can understand it and translate it, but not speak it. Uh,
I would probably be like Chewbacca, or not Chewbacca. I would probably be like Jabba the Hutt if it were me, and
mhm,
I just
mhm.
would refuse. I mean, Wookiees can't speak Galactic Basic because of their vocal cords, according to lore. But I would be like, no, I am not going to learn Galactic Basic. You have to
Yeah.
translate it for me completely.
That's
That's actually it's kind of a funny conceit of the Star Wars universe, right? That but it's kind of fascinating too if you think about how everyone speaks their own language, but everyone also understands everyone else's language, right? Luke totally gets when R2D2 is speaking binary, and Han Solo
Mm-hmm.
understands, Shriwook. I think there's probably even some scenes when Chewbacca's talking to Luke, and Luke understands what he's saying. I don't remember off the top of my
mhm.
head, but
Yeah, sometimes he does, sometimes
it's.
he doesn't. I think
I guess it's the
that's Leia.
maybe the Star Wars universe education system is better than ours. Everyone's polylingual,
Maybe.
Mhm,
right?
mhm. Are you ready for some force lore then? I only have a few things for that.
Absolutely.
Um, the lore I have from this is the introduction of two things. One, the big thing, being Boba Fett is introduced in the special, as we talked about, and would go
I
on to
thought you were
become
going to
fan
say
favorite
that Life
character.
Day was a big thing. That's rude.
Life Day
It's
is
a
a big
very
thing,
important holiday.
but it is not. But it is not as big a thing in the Star Wars media until recently. Suddenly there are Life Day references happening all over the place in Star Wars media, but for a while it was kind of forgotten about.
Because we're trying to
But
revive the holiday thing. Because
I
there's
think
not a
that's what it
holiday
is.
tie-in for
There's
Star Wars. They just always come out in December.
Yeah, so they're trying to exactly tie it into real life holiday and use Life Day. So there's like a Life Day cookbook, there's a Life Day short story anthology, and all sorts of stuff like that you can buy. Disney, of course, at their parks have Life Day celebrations around the holidays and stuff. So, and then the other thing is we get to see the Wookiees' home world, which in the special is just called Wookiee Homeworld. It gets the name Kashyyyk later on, as the planet of the Wookiees. But I do like that the design remains fairly consistent. So when we finally see the live action version of Kashyyyk in canon in Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, it the planet and like the dwelling places and stuff look very similar to what they look like
Right.
in this um, TV special. And that was one of the things that George Lucas had specifically wanted the TV special, was to show the Wookiee homeworld. So I think that was kind of something he had always hoped to get back into canon in a better way than the special was able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting the way that the house was like designed and arranged, because the in from a certain point of view, Empire Strikes Back, there's an episode, or there's a chapter that is a short story about a Wookiee ship, and it is made of wood. And so I was like, this is like fascinating to think about a wood ship that is still like airtight and stuff. And that doesn't feel like it fits with this depiction of the house. That like they seem like very divergent technologies.
Mm,
Um, but I like the idea of the ship one. So part of me
yeah.
is like, I want more of that. I want to actually see that
In
ship, because
the
that would be so cool.
Mm.
Star Wars
Walking
High
on the jungle.
Republic in the Star Wars High Republic book series, there are a few Wookiee Jedi characters that are prominent in that, and they all have wooden lightsaber hilts,
Oh, nice.
because wood is a very important part of Wookiee culture and connects them to their trees and to the Force. And I think we even see that in one of the, is it a Clone Wars episode, or no? It's Bad Batch, I think, is the episode where they
Mm.
encounter Wookiee former Padawan, because this is after the purge, the temple and stuff, who's like trying to run away and stay out from the Empire, and they return him to Kashyyyk. And there's something in there about how like all Wookiees have some sort of connection to the Force through the trees, and so that's
Mm.
interesting piece of
Well, you
Star Wars
mentioned
canon.
the look of the thing and how it stayed consistent. So I know that Ralph McQuarrie, who was the Star Wars concept artist, was hired for this thing to paint, and that painting of the forest and the Chewbacca house was a McQuarrie matte painting, um,
Ah,
and and I think this was kind of previewing a few years down the road. Lucas had originally intended in Jedi for Endor to be Kashyyyk. They were going to go back to the Wookiee home planet. The Ewoks were going to be Wookiees, but there was some kind of cost thing going on. I think it was too expensive to get guys in full Chewbacca outfits or something. So they went with the Ewoks instead and shot it actually just right up the road from here, up in Marin County somewhere, up the
Nice.
Redwoods.
That makes sense. That
Yeah.
makes a lot of
So
sense, actually. Yeah. Yeah. From the outside, it looks right. It's just like, I mean, again, right? They threw a TV and stuff in and decided that was
coffee
like
pot,
well,
coffee
yeah, I
pot.
mean, it
just
looks
like
all
it's
it
pretty.
looks all cool and Star Warsy from the outside. Then you go into the house and it just looks like any crappy '70s apartment,
It
with
looks like the
fake wood
Brady
paneling and
Bunch living room.
Yeah.
exactly.
I
Uh,
used to love watching the Brady Bunch, so I'm familiar with the living room. But it does. It's like
Nice.
this open space that, like, the entryway to the door opens right into it.
It doesn't have like the orange and yellow panels and stuff, but it's
I mean,
pretty much right there. All the wood paneling and such. That was so freaking '70s.
yep, yep.
What are you gonna do?
well,
No clue.
I guess we have come to our favorite part that all of you listening have been dying to hear. What are we going to actually rate this thing? And since this is our Star Wars season, we're still rating it out of Kyber crystals. So, how would you rate this out of 10 Kyber crystals?
No Kyber crystals, none at all. Like I feel like I'm owed Kyber crystals for having spent any time watching this.
I like it. Keep a running tally of how
Pace.
many times you watch it, and that's how many Kyber crystals you are getting.
That's fantastic. Pace, what are you rating it?
Um, Negative one. It costs you Kyber crystals to watch it. It costs you force and life force to watch it. It robs you of it.
It does rob you of your life force. It's true. It's true. And C3PO lies about R2D2. So I probably would rate it. This is hard. I had a number, but then y'all went so low that you're negatives. I in my like holiday movie rating, it got 1 snowflake on a scale of 1 to 5. Um, this one I will probably give it 1 kyber crystal, only because it it stars Wookiees, and they are cool, as my shirt
Mhm.
will attest. I like them, and I like celebrating holidays. I have a Chewbacca shirt that says "Fa la 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 larg," and he's covered in Christmas lights. Um, I love that. So I'm gonna give it 1 because it's a non-humanoid star,
Cool.
and
I
my
like it.
favorite kill is the 1 kill because
The
just
Empire
like
guy.
toss him over the edge.
Yep.
I was going to say my favorite kill was probably the brain cells that completely died while I was watching this movie.
Same. Same for me. Um.
I don't think I had any jump scares
Yeah, I
at
would
all.
be surprised if you did. Um. So Ben, where can our listeners find you if they want to follow your socials, see what projects you're working on, any books coming out, those things?
Well, I have a very complicated and cleverly named website, benmonroe.com. You can
Hmm.
go there and see all the stuff that I'm up to and find links to my books and things. I've stopped giving out my socials only because the whole social media feed is in such field is in such flux right now. You can
Hmm.
find links to all my social media accounts on my website, but if I tell you I'm on, whatever today, if you hear this a year down the road, that may be out of business. Who
Hmm.
knows? And I know, one of the sites that I used to be very, very active on, I just don't even go to anymore for a lot of obvious reasons. I'm not going to give them any airspace.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so benmonroe.com. And in fact, I do actually just have a short story in a book that came out just last week, actually,
Ooh.
of I guess I could hold it up. It's not worth it. The book is called Winding Paths. It's a whole collection of game-themed short stories. So if you are
Ah, yeah.
a gamer of any kind, or if you like board games, video games, my story was about a cursed board game because that's board games and RPGs are kind of more my thing than video games. But um, you can find that on Amazon or have your local bookstore order it for you because that's good too.
Or
Love it.
bookshop.org. Did you
Oh,
know on
bookshop.org.
bookshop.org you can designate which independent bookstore you are your purchases benefit?
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
I didn't realize it, and it's not just in your account, like you have to do it on the homepage. It's like right there, but because it's like so obviously right there, I didn't notice it until I was at Red Emma's, which is a local independent bookstore here in Baltimore. And they were like, yeah, or just order it off of bookshop.org because it was a book that they don't normally carry. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I do that sometimes, but I figured it was better here. And they were like, if you do it through bookshop.org, you can choose us. And so then it took me 5 minutes to find it because I looked in all the wrong
Yeah.
places. But
And,
eventually I did.
and
Yay.
and then Red Emma gets the money and doesn't actually have to do any of the work of shipping and processing it. So even better, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good deal.
And we do HNAC, it needs some massive updates, but we have a bookshop.org, which we link in the show notes. Whenever we reference books that you can click on, it'll take you to that and you can see the book and order it from there. And
I didn't know that.
you did in the past, but you have since forgotten. It is okay. But yeah, we have 3 lists on there, and this tells you how long it's been. Like, I update it as I edit it, but like beyond that, I don't do anything with it. So, but there's Pace's recommended reads. There's Joe, former co-host of the podcast, recommended reads, and then there's a list of books referenced on episodes, and that's the one I keep up to date with all the books we
Nice.
reference. So you can go to that and check that out and
Yeah.
support your local bookshop that way.
Maybe I'll work on my own recommended reads.
You should. You should.
I'm not Pace. I don't have Pace's superpowers on recommendations, but I could recommend some good stuff.
You can. You can. Well, our next movie that will be coming out is A New Hope. That will come out sometime in January, probably towards the end of January, since Emily and I still need to actually plan out our season a little bit more than we've have. Empire Strikes Back, from a certain point of view, will come out in the next few weeks. Alien is going to be part of our Star Wars season. Every other week, we're starting with Star Wars: A New Hope, and then we'll watch Alien, and then Empire Strikes Back, and then Aliens, and go back and forth like that. So lots of cool stuff coming up. So stay
with
tuned.
our Patreon, and like shout out to Patreon, as you know, but we're doing all of the Predator series for movie commentaries. We've got the bonus Star Wars movies that are not part of the trilogy for our horror buff levels, and we've got all sorts of different Star Wars
TV shows and stuff
TV
for the
show stuff
BooTubes.
for the BooTubes. So there is something for everyone. You get a lot if you're a horror nerd, and you get even more if you're a horror buff.
Yep.
So thank you, Ben, for being our lovely return guest and friend of the podcast.
No, anytime. This is fun. I mean, I love talking about Star Wars. Any Star Wars, even bad Star Wars, is still good Star Wars to me. You know.
That's fair. And that's it for our show. Our theme music was by Matt May. Horror Nerds at Church releases seasonally on Thursdays. Please comment, rate, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Support us on Patreon and get access to exclusive movie commentary episodes, BooTube episodes, and more bonus content by going to patreon.com/horrornerdsatchurch. It starts at only $5 to sign up, which is cheaper than a brain evaporator. Follow us on on our social media, Facebook and Instagram at Horror Nerds at Church, and Twitter at HNACPOD, and Blue Sky at HNACPOD, right? Yeah. For all the latest updates about upcoming films, news, and other announcements. Until next time, go watch better holiday specials, please.
I like it.